All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here and for introducing yourselves in the chat and filling out the poll. My name is Brennison Wheeler. I use she, her pronouns. I am the Education and Outreach Coordinator at Women's Advocates, which is a nonprofit organization in St. Paul, Minnesota, that offers a continuum of safety through our prevention programming through events like these, as well as our emergency shelter and aftercare housing support services for victim survivors of domestic violence. Just a few quick announcements and reminders. We will be sending out a follow-up email with a link to the recording of this webinar and a PDF of the PowerPoint slides. At the end, I will also send information on how to receive a certificate of attendance if you would like to request one. Also want to extend a lot of gratitude to our ASL interpreters and to our three wonderful panelists here today. Just a reminder, throughout the webinar, we will have some moments of engagement. So feel free to send anything in the chat, send questions to the Q&A. We'll hopefully have enough time at the end to answer some more additional questions that may come up. And then just make sure that you're clicking the button above the text box to send your message to all panelists and attendees so everyone can see your messages. So thank you for doing that. And I am extremely excited and honored to be able to host this event and give a platform to these three incredible women who will introduce themselves shortly to discuss a very critical, valuable, and important topic, which is supporting the mental health wellness of Black women. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. I'll share the results so you all can see. It looks like about 44% of those who have responded to the poll said that they're not Black, but they're also looking for to gain resources and hear more about how they can support Black women's mental health. And then 39% reported that they are Black, African American, African, and that they would like to gain resources and hear from others with whom they identify with. And then a few in the other categories as well too about what they're hoping to learn. And then a few little fun polls, two quick ones where would you rather have have all traffic lights you approach be green or never have to stand in line again? And it looks like 56% said that they would rather never have to stand in line again. I would say I fall in that category as well too. And then, would you rather give up all drinks except for water or give up eating anything that was cooked in an oven? And 63% said that they would rather give up all drinks except for water. And I think I actually fall in the minority for that one too. So anyone can chime in with that, see if they want. We just thought it would be a nice little icebreaker and learn a little bit more about you all who are here. Okay, so we'll go ahead and officially jump into this event. This is a overview of the agenda, so what to expect for the next 90 minutes together. So you'll see we have different themes for our discussion. We'll have opportunities for engagement with you all. So we hope that it is a comprehensive, knowing that of course we can't get to everything. This is a huge topic, so we will probably just begin to start to scratch the surface. So we'll first begin with meeting the panelists, and they'll introduce themselves however they would like and also add why they feel that it was important for them to be a part of this conversation. So Saran, you can go ahead and start.
I'm Saran Cryer, and as you can see, I am a mental health and wellness counselor at Women's Advocates, and I work to empower women to find their unique selves. And I believe in the African proverb, I am because you are. And this just really enlightens the therapeutic engagement. So let me just say the reason why I feel that it's important for me to be part of this conversation. It is part of who I am. And I feel that the issues in the conversations that we're going to address impacts the mental health wellness of all Black women and families and communities. So I just take honor in having an opportunity to be with you to talk about mental health wellness and how it impacts our community, our families, as well as Black women in general. And I also want to welcome those who are not of African descent. It is an honor to be here. And I'm just happy that you felt that this was a place that you would like to be. So other than that, I'll pass it on to Hafia.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Hafia Gray. Oh, did we skip Dorothy?
I can go back.
Okay. My name is Hafia Gray. I'm a licensed psychotherapist and drug and alcohol counselor. And similar to the reasons Saran gave, I just think it's time. I think this is a very timely and appropriate conversation to have, given everything that we've been through over the last, not just centuries, but especially over the last couple years or so. I wanted to make myself available for this conversation because I grew up on the premise that it takes a village. And doing this work has really allowed me to be a part of just so many wonderful people's villages. And I think that when we do this work together, when we learn together, when we talk together, when we dialogue and heal together, it's just more effective and love-filled. So that's why I'm here. I'm here to represent a Black woman, a Black therapist. I'm here to have these tough conversations so that my daughter can grow up in a community and environment that is more loving and accepting of her. And not just my daughter, but all of our daughters. So that's why I thought it would be important to be here. And with that, I'll pass to Dorothy.
Hi, I'm Dorothy Chella. I am a licensed professional clinical counselor, so an LPCC here in Minnesota. I work at Face to Face, which works with the ages 11 to 24, as well as at a private practice that works in Egan that works with ages 13 and up. And since I work primarily with young adults and teens and adolescents, I just think it's really important to talk about the perspective of Black women, the support that we need starting from when we're young, and then ways to build up our communities and ways to have all professionals really be able to support us in a way that's direct and that meets our unique needs in the society that kind of deals with lots of intersections of different things. And just so, like for me as a Black woman and for me as a first generation American who's also part of the African community, to just be able to speak about mental health and the needs and how important it is so that we can support each other in better ways together.
Thank you all so much for introducing yourselves. I also just wanted to let everyone know that since this is a webinar, the only people that are visible and can be heard are the panelists. So if you're an attendee, no worries. You don't have to worry about having your microphone off or anything because we can't hear you. But we do want to hear from you, and we would like to hear more about what roles in the community that you hold, now that you just heard a little bit more about the roles that some of our panelists hold. So I'm going to go ahead and send in the chat a link. You can also, if you have a smartphone and you like to use it, you can turn on the camera and the link will pop up. If you don't like to use this word cloud, you can also just send anything in the chat. So you can go ahead and click on that link that I just sent out, or you can scan the QR code and you can enter up to 10 different words to describe your social identities, your profession, your familial roles, your community roles, anything that you think makes you uniquely you. So I'm going to go ahead and share the word cloud screen. And with the Menti, as a word is increasingly submitted, so the word will get bigger. So advocate is one of the biggest words I see on my screen right now. So that means a couple of people have submitted those. So it'll give us all just a few minutes to go ahead and send in some words to describe your roles. So we have a little bit of a better sense of who is on the call and just more about you. And then the panelists, you can chime in if there's any words on this word cloud that are standing out to you. I'm seeing daughter, sister, mother.
Yeah. Lots of advocates, community-based helpers, educators.
Friends, supporters, neighbors, survivors. Absolutely. You can all feel free to continue to contribute to this lovely word cloud. I just saw prayer warrior. That's a different one I haven't seen. A concerned ally, a fighter. We have people putting more social identities like queer, deaf,
Listener, mentor.
a dog mom. Great. Yeah. Wonderful. We also see some brothers out there, some uncles, some sons. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start sharing the other slide, but continue to add on, as I said, if you would like. So thank you for sharing a little bit more about yourselves. We will dive right into the first theme, which is mental health wellness and its barriers. So you may have remembered when you registered for this webinar, you had an option to submit a question, and we got hundreds and hundreds of questions. And we took some time to organize them all and think about if we could group them into different themes. And this was one that was very, very prominent. And so we thought it would make sense to start out with some conversation about mental health wellness and some barriers that may exist, particularly for Black women in being able to maintain mental health wellness and receive resources and support. So this is a quote from a new book that was edited by Tarana Burke and Brené Brown, and it has dozens of Black voices. It's an anthology. And in the beginning of the anthology, there is an interview. And so I'm going to read a few quotes just to kind of set the tone for this section and just to introduce the topic before we dive into the discussion questions. So this quote reads, "I believe the greatest casualty of trauma, including white supremacy, which is definitely a form of intergenerational systemic trauma, is that vulnerability becomes dangerous, risky, even life-threatening. But here's the painful piece. It's not like if you're Black, you don't need vulnerability to experience joy, belonging, intimacy, and love. It's that we've created a culture that makes it unsafe for you to be vulnerable. It's not like you need less. It's just we've created a world where you're afforded less. Our humanity, talking about Black individuals, our individual and collective vulnerability needs and deserves some breathing room." So I'll just pause for a moment if people kind of want to read that over, think about anything that may have come up for them, maybe have some awareness of if you had any bodily reactions, noticing your breathing, noticing just how you're sitting, if you felt tensed, if you felt relaxed, thinking of that mind-body connection throughout this. And then this next quote is not from that book. I included the source if you want to look at that later, but it reads, "It's important to understand that race-based stress and trauma extends beyond the direct behaviors of prejudiced individuals. We are surrounded by constant reminders that race-related danger can occur at any time, anywhere, to anyone." So we want to engage you all in each of the themes. So our first prompt for you to write in the chat at your leisure is, what makes it difficult for you to seek professional mental health support? And you can be honest. I know we have 3 wonderful mental health providers on the call right here, but I promise you that they are receptive to any feedback that you have. And just make sure that you're sending your message to all panelists and attendees. So clicking the button above the text box just to change that. But I'm seeing some people are saying time, maybe expenses, the cost, lack of options can be some barriers. Absolutely. Perceived stigma. And that could be, stigma that's been internalized or stigma in the community or negative perceptions of mental health or mental health support from your family. It being difficult to find mental health providers that look like you. Dealing with insurance or lack of insurance, feeling judged, health insurance, inability to keep the same therapist, identifying providers with openings. Psych Today might not be updated, finding the right therapist. It can be difficult to find clinical options of people who understand race-specific influences that can lead someone to therapy, being skeptical, finding time outside of work, not sure what to ask for, bring up, or talk about if that person's never experienced or gone to therapy before. And some are sharing in the chat that it can be difficult to access Black women therapists that are a good fit for them, being judged by family for going to therapy. Yep. Yeah, thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing. Yeah, lots of different experiences that people can have that can deter them from wanting to seek that support, even if they feel like they may benefit from it. All right, continue to send things in the chat if you'd like, but we'll progress into the first set of questions. So I'll go ahead and allow Saran to take it away and you all can chat for about 15 minutes about this theme.
Okay. So the first thing, mental health, let's see, it's what does mental health wellness look like, feel like, and sound like for the Black community? And the second part to this question is what barriers stand in the way of achieving this? So I'm going to start and I'm going to talk about what it looks like to me, what mental health wellness look like to me for the Black community, and what it feels like and sounds like. So mental health wellness look like a daily self-care practice or routine grounded in intentional healing for the body, mind, and spirit. And it feels like mindfulness, being in the present and noticing our own personal senses and sensations and noticing the same for those we are engaging with. And lastly, what it sounds like gratitude and harmony. So ladies, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. Just the senses that definitely resonates with me. For me, it feels like home. Wellness feels like home. When I can enter a space and the smells are familiar, the people look familiar, the sounds are familiar and inviting to me and my kind, that feels well, that feels safe, which is another word that came to mind as you were talking, Saran. Wellness feels safe.
Yeah.
I think for me, it feels like a place where we can be ourselves and a place that's welcoming for us to be ourselves. And it sounds like, honestly, in some ways, silence, so that people are listening and they hear what we're saying. They're reflecting back on what they're saying. They're understanding, like truly understanding what we're saying. And it feels like, I think when I think about it, it feels like peace and understanding. And peace is not always like the kind of kumbaya I think that people think, but just being able to be like, I'm coming to have more understanding of myself and I'm having peace about who I am and how I get to show up in places. And I'm just happy that in the direction that I'm moving, right? Because not everybody might in the present moment be like, I'm happy with the person I'm becoming, but it's like, but I do feel like I'm on the right path for me. And that's being decided for me by me.
Yes, and that is so important. That's wonderful. What barriers stand in the way of achieving this? I kind of feel there's a lack of information and community resources on mental health wellness. I think it would be really great if people would know the difference between mental health wellness and mental illness. I think the two kind of clash together, and people like when you mention mental health is, oh my goodness, that means there's something wrong with me. And I think having a clear understanding, like through community resources, even mental health private practices and other community agencies to share some type of awareness of what mental health wellness really is, and talking to their clients and even other associates to really talk about it and to have some type of a understanding that there is a difference between mental health wellness and mental illness. What do you think?
I think some of the barriers that stand in the way, I mean, I think we know a lot of the typical ones, right? Like, I definitely think racism gets in the way.
Absolutely.
And in lots of ways, like, I kind of separate small business capitalism versus big business capitalism. So I think big business capitalism can get in the way, and that kind of grind mentality and that grind culture. And then I think just for Black women specifically, the amount of things and responsibilities, whether it's work, whether it's family, whether it's friendships, whether it's community-based work that gets put on us, and therefore perpetuating these ideas that we can handle anything and never break. And so even when those things happen, kind of people being like, you got this, you'll be fine, like just brush it off, you're so strong, you're so resilient. And so I think just this idea that strength means that I can endure, we can endure anything and everything definitely can get in the way of those things, because it can be hard to admit like my capacity isn't there. And it can be hard, I think, for other people to also hear that without pressuring us to push past our capacity.
It's such a hard thing to deal with, because it's an expectation that we even seem like, is it possible? And it's not. And it just brings on more illnesses, more problems. And that's really a good point.
Right. Time came up a couple times in the chat, and just kind of delving more into what you were saying, Dorothy, like feeling like we don't have time or the responsibility or even the luxury of taking care of ourselves and our mental health. And I think this pandemic and the use of Zoom and other electronic platforms has helped with that. Now we can meet with people during their lunch breaks if that's how they choose to spend that time, or right after work without having to worry about a commute or finding a parking space. And so now we can meet with each other real time electronically, but then that comes with its own set of like caveats and setbacks, because people feel like they can't engage as well as they could in person, via video. So time is a barrier as well, especially because a lot of Black women, we're taking on so many responsibilities. We're working, we're taking care of our children, because of our extended families and how those things are set up. We're taking care of family members that traditional households don't typically take care of. So it's just a lot. So time can serve as a barrier too.
Yes, that makes so much sense. And it's almost, do we have time to take care of ourselves? And what does that even look like?
Right. And the guilt associated with taking care of ourselves. I don't know how many times I have to have conversations with clients that self-care and setting boundaries is an act of self-love. There's no space for guilt or shame when you're taking care of yourself. So let's fix that narrative. But like you said, Dorothy, it's been perpetuated for centuries that we have to bear that burden.
And I think when I tie in big business capitalism with what's happening in the self-care kind of wellness area of like, it means a spa day, it means a vacation, it means all these things that also take a lot of time and cost a lot of money. And so I think people feel like when they're not engaging in those types of things, then they're not taking care of themselves. But I think, like you're saying, are you setting boundaries? Are you waking up every day and are you realizing like, this is actually my capacity and I need to say no to things. I need to limit things, because if I push past my capacity, then I'll end up unwell. my mental health will be affected. And am I even able to be in tune enough with my body to know when those things are happening? Because I think, even myself included, I've learned with therapy over time that it looks like a headache. It looks like having a weekend when I don't want to sit down with anybody. It looks like stomach aches. And it took me a long time to pick up on those things. Because I think one of the biggest things for Black women, specifically, even in the work that I do, is like, are you not understanding what's going on with your body? Are you listening and then moving in the direction that it needs? Not just, like my therapist said really well last week, like, you're used to crashing, and that forces you to pause. And I would like you to not pause before you, I want you to pause before you crash. And that was even a hard concept for me, because I am used to the feeling of crashing. And that being like, okay, it's time for a break. And are you just paying attention to the signs, or are you ignoring them?
Oh, that is so true. And it's hard. Those signs are really definitely hard. And it's almost as if we do put them away. We put them somewhere away and we figure will go back and just meet with it again. Okay, I will take some time out for myself, but it just goes on and it just continues. Thank you, ladies. I'm going to move to question two. How can Black people in their own communities and families start to have conversations about addressing mental health stigma? And that's a pretty good question. And I'm thinking like just having mental health resources available where people can access, their communities, and their communities, that they could find places to where there's information, even the community newspaper, to talk about, use this topic as a way of people communicating. And for families, maybe just finding someone in the family just saying, I need to really have this conversation, not only with my partner or a significant other, but with my children. And how do they find time to do that? Or how can the family really come together and to develop time and give themselves permission to have a conversation about addressing mental health stigma?
I think when we talked about this together, the three of us, we were like, maybe using a different word than stigma. So I'm going to try to do that, of being like, and when we had our conversation, for those that are listening, we kind of talked about stigma just being feeling like it's a self-blame, but stigma isn't something that we as a community decided. There are lots of barriers to mental health. And so kind of some of the ways to discuss barriers is just being honest about the system, being honest about systems that we don't trust, being honest about medical systems and systems that are supposed to support other people not being there for us in a way that feels good or safe. And then really talking about what are ways that we can address what's going on in yourself, in your mental health, whether that's stress, whether that's anger showing up really often, or irritability, or just worrying all of the time, and really being able to call out some of that stuff with people, and just like, I really notice you're really stressed out. I really notice you're overwhelmed. And I notice that like we maybe have long periods where we don't talk, like, what's going on? Do you need more support from me? Do you need more? Do we need to find someone? And I think being able to point out the things that you're seeing and that you're worried about, and then just being able to say that there are, Black providers, there are culturally responsive providers out there, and it might take a very long time, which in some cases it definitely does, to find that. But you deserve to be able to have a person or a space where you can process these things in a healthy way and learn different ways to cope with lots of the things that are just going to keep happening in our lives.
Yes.
Yeah, Dorothy, you mentioned just kind of highlighting things in external systems that aren't working, or that kind of make us scratch our heads and make us uncomfortable. But I think even having conversations about what's happening within our internal systems, i.e. our families, that have, caused some stress or strife or even trauma, and starting there. I know within my own family, and I can admittedly be a bit of a fire starter and a pistol, but having those conversations, and they might feel very conflictual at start, but I feel like conflict breeds change. And so gently having those conversations at Sunday dinners, at brunch, talking about things within our own families that don't sit well with us in ways that we can heal together. And then utilizing those resources like a family therapy, a group healing circle,
Yeah.
that will help facilitate some of that healing. But you have to talk about it, especially in the Black community, and that's the community I belong to. So I can only, personally speak about that. But we shove things under the rug. I'm just
Yeah.
gonna say it. We have that mentality that we have to be strong, we have to grit and bear.
Yeah.
Well, we're learning that causes a lot of issues,
It
a
does.
lot of issues beyond psychological issues, but physical health issues. It manifests in our relationships. It manifests in the way we manage our money, the way we spend our time. So I think we need to just start having these conversations, albeit uncomfortable at first, but they are
Mhm.
very necessary. And seeking professional help when those conversations just seem unapproachable or very hard to start.
Yeah, I think it's just being courageous enough to start it, making the time for it. As you mentioned, there's so many issues that we have in our community, and there's so much that's going on. It's like a nonstop scene to where our mental health is being affected, oh my goodness, worldwide. And how do we just stop and just say, hey, even just your own family, as you were saying, starting with your family and really talking about how it's affecting us, how these things in our community, even in our own household, is affecting us, and what we could do to be champions or leaders and helping not only our community, but our families and people that we serve. It's really important. And I think when we even think about mental health, I know it is somewhat of an intergenerational piece, to where I could say, like in my family, the the elders would in the past would look at that as something not talked about. There could be Uncle George, who is always put aside in a room, but we know something's wrong with Uncle George. So it's just this feeling of something is wrong and it's mental, and we will take care of Uncle George, but let Uncle George just sit. He's kind of over here, but still part of the family. And I don't know if this is what's happening with us today. It's not like we're locking an Uncle George in the room, but are we ignoring it? Are we ignoring it when we see in our own selves or even our family members? Are we ignoring that there is some concern and we do need to have this conversation? Any comments on that? No? Any comments or? No? Ladies? No?
No.
Okay, we could move on. I know our time's almost up. I'm trying to keep it going here.
Yeah, no, that was great. One thing that when Dorothy was speaking, there was a tweet last night actually that I found, and it's by a Black woman named Zendashe Lorelia Brown, and she said, "I dream of never being called resilient again in my life. I'm exhausted by strength. I want support. I want softness. I want ease. I want to be amongst kin, not patted on the back for how well I take a hit or for how many." And she goes on to say, "Instead of hearing you are one of the most resilient people I know, I want to hear you are so loved. You are so cared for. You are genuinely covered." And so I thought that really resonated with me and was something that I thought made sense at this point in the conversation as well too. And I've learned so much, and part of that I resonated with that statement as well too, as someone who is not Black. And so I think that it's a huge barrier, and especially the onus is put on a lot of Black women for carrying that brunt and being expected to not be affected by horrific things. So
Yeah.
thank you all so much for sharing about that. And hopefully we can continue to shift the narrative to say more things and not be quick to say, oh, your strength and your resilience, but oh, you are deserving of love, you are deserving of care and to be held and all of these things. So thank you so much. There is someone in the chat who mentioned, speaking about our elders, many who aren't very tech savvy have been disconnected from life, which has led to overwhelming loneliness and depression. So yeah, definitely the generational is a thing too of our elders and older adults who, may not have the tools or the information of accessing mental health or thinking that that's a priority for them too. So thank you. We'll move on to the next section. So the next theme is about the panelists' experiences and perspectives of being a Black woman. So again, with the caveat, of course, that they're not speaking for all Black women, that Black women are very diverse individuals, so they can only speak on their own experience. So if you hear something here, don't generalize it and say that it's for everyone. So just be very clear about that language that we're using. And something that kind of speaks about the difference between kind of when we get into different like ethnicities and different races within the context of marginalization. I think this part again from that interview really kind of speaks to that individuality and how it is important and how we can't just group everyone into as POC or people of color, and that there is very real, very concrete, very important distinctions between them. So this is Tarana saying, we often carry our trauma in similar ways, but the roads that led us to the trauma are also different. We must pay attention to that road. That road is our humanity. That road is the piece that we're talking about. And then this is another quote about April Ray, and specifically talking about her experience as a Black woman, saying it is a dehumanization of Black people. And we don't see that with any other race. It's ingrained in us from our history. White people used to have picnics at hangings and lynchings, bringing their children to watch Black bodies suffer and die. We are not far removed from that. It's just being played out through technology now. And it hurts. So that was an article, and you can read it if you'd like to hear more about that perspective of when Black death goes viral, which is something that unfortunately happens on a very regular basis in the United States and throughout the world. And it has been happening for so long, and there's just kind of increasingly more media attention on that and what that impact can be, especially when you are going to share a video. Maybe think of this and maybe hesitate. Does this need, can I support in a different way that is not traumatizing? And yeah, so I'm not gonna go on that too long, but that is something to consider as well. So for you all, the kind of opportunity for engagement, if you'd like to share, is what are ways that you can see yourself honoring the experiences of Black women? So before we kind of hear some of those specific experiences from the panelists, I would like to hear from you all if there are some ways that you have honored experiences of Black women in your life before, or ways that you want to in the future, in the near future. I know for me, something that comes to mind is listening and creating space, is creating that space and not taking that space up. Because I think sometimes people have good intentions of, oh, I told them I wanted to listen, but then I talked the whole time and I didn't let them share. And so I think being able to do that in a way that is judgment-free, that is empathetic, that is compassionate, that is loving, that is coming from a place of that shared humanity is really important. And again, right, having multiple opportunities, not saying, oh, I asked them that one time when I heard something terrible in the news, but continually making that space and continually prioritizing that and honoring it, and not saying, well, what about this? Or maybe you're overreacting, or what if it's not that bad? Or, oh, you're supposed to feel this way because I heard someone else felt that way. Taking it for how it is in that moment, knowing that A, it could change, B, that is their experience, right? And we can honor it by listening and not saying, not invalidating, which I think a lot of us do unintentionally. So I'm going to go ahead and read some things too from the chat, but I'm seeing some people saying listen and right, not making assumptions. Again, listening, not making, lots of things about not making assumptions and actually listening. And also I think honoring experiences could also be in the form of, encouraging them to share them on a broader level too. I know that there's been people who have come to me and said, oh, I have this poem, or oh, I have these things, and encouraging them if they do want to share that with others in whatever capacity. So just kind of asking how you can support them, and having ideas yourself too of, can we do check-ins? What is a way for you? How do you like to do check-ins? And also, if you're curious, not being afraid to ask about people's experiences or what their perspectives are on things, instead of, again, making those assumptions and saying, open-ended questions of, hey, do you want to share your thoughts about this? Like, I'm here for you if you do, and if you don't, that's perfectly fine too. Seeing others in the chat saying being brave enough to have real conversations, right? Not just kind of surface level things, but really being able to bear witness to pain and to the real effects, because I think people want to turn their heads, they want to deny it, they want to think it's not real, they don't want to see it, especially if it's in someone that they care about. Again, not making interruptions, not making comparisons. I think that's huge too. Someone's sharing their experience with you, not saying, oh, I experienced something similar, or, just allowing the focus to be on them. Others are saying getting interested in different customs and beliefs, asking questions, doing my own research on issues, trying to be more informed. Yep, there's, as you'll see at the end, there's lots and lots of resources of people volunteering their experiences and perspectives. Acknowledging their existence and encouraging the sharing of their stories, which in most cases are very similar to their own. Going to curb the use of the word resilient and learning how much of a burden that label can be to people who are struggling. Actually seeing color, right? Not engaging in colorblind racism. Being open and encouraging of criticism, right? If sometimes they're kind of conditioned to protect you and not want to hurt your feelings and make themselves smaller for that. So thank you so much for that. We'll move on so we have some more time, but thank you for sharing. I'll pass it on to Saran again to lead this second theme here about your experiences of being Black women.
Okay, thank you. So we're now we're at theme 2, question 1. What can be some of the impacts of vicarious racial and historical intergenerational trauma on Black women? I feel that the impact it's a never-ending traumatic experience. It exacerbates physical health. It affects heart disease, stroke, hypertension. There's so much that impacts our physical body. And the list goes on and on and on. It impacts, it's just devastating on the human body. So all of these things is to where it's just too heavy for the body to carry. So the body just turns on itself. And yeah, I just think it's just so much and it's overwhelming. Sophia or Dorothy, what's your response?
I agree. I think there's a lot of the physical symptoms that show up, like holding your breath,
Yes.
locked jaw. I just had a client talk about that today. I think dying early for a lot of our elders, a lot of people in our community. It is just like the overwhelming daily impact of stress literally does take our lives. And then I think, yeah, it creates low self-esteem. It creates a society where, or a world where you have to, or feel like you have to second guess yourself all the time. I do think there's that kind of that, am I going crazy? Like, did this thing just happen? Did it happen in the way that I thought it did? Am I wrong? Should I have done anything? And so all of that processing about like how someone else treated you, to the point where you feel low about yourself and your self-confidence is low.
Yeah.
I think all of those things kind of impact that.
And I think all of those things furthermore like impact how we show up in our relationships. So the interpersonal ramifications of vicarious and racial trauma on Black women. You alluded to that earlier, Brenison, in that quote, this inability or this unwillingness to feel safe enough to be vulnerable, to
Yeah.
practice vulnerability, not just with ourselves, but with each other. I mean, we see it perpetuated in Black relationships and Black family systems all the time. You know, this protective stance that we feel like we have to take, or this avoidance stance that we feel like we have to take because of, you know, just years of disruptance within the Black family. So, you know, getting back to that softness, and not feeling like we have to be, you know, strong and vigilant and even hyper vigilant, just to survive. You know, we see that too, kind of, you know, just manifested in people's relationships and their willingness to be with people.
Yeah. Yeah, the softness, the kindness, the opportunity to just let go. We have been so affected by negative perceptions. It's almost as if our feelings are void of it, and we go straight to the mind. We go straight to the thoughts to dismantle the negative perceptions. It's to where we have experienced it for so long. We see negative stereotypes, biases, or whatnot in almost everything and in our daily lives, to where, you know what, I'm not even feeling all of that, but in my thoughts, I'm to dismantle it. I have to dismantle it to rebuke the negative perception. And this is what it looks like. Just for example, just saying to a Black woman, just saying to herself, I am not what you say I am. That is your perception of how you want to feel about me. And in my integrity, it just doesn't allow me to own up to your perceptions. It's almost to where we have this stance. It's like, you know, these feelings are already hard, and we have learned how to just think in a way to where I'm not going to deal with it, but I can speak. I can speak my mind, and I can even not speak my mind and still deal with these perceptions in a way of dismantling them.
I think for the second point of question one of the things that I'm thinking of is kind of like the ways that Black women can be labeled as like masculine or strong and all of the like in a negative sense. And I think that very much can impact how we show up authentically, because
That's
we're
a good
always
point.
worried about like, if I move this way, is someone going to think this? If I dress this way, is someone going to think this? And
Right.
so we're so worried about what other people are thinking,
Yes.
and how that's going to impact our services in restaurants, our ability to get services at agencies, that we're not able to be ourselves authentically, or sometimes even know what that looks like, because we're so busy fighting all of those
Yes.
stereotypes. We're
Yes.
so busy trying not to be something that we're not actually being in tune with who we actually are or who we want to grow to be.
Okay. Yeah. That's true. Yes. So, okay. Let's see. So, how can we honor the humanity of Black women and celebrate the incredible lives that we lead?
Oh gosh, what a great question.
I think that's a wonderful question.
Makes me happy. I don't know. I just think about my own friend group, and we just kind of got together a few weeks ago, and we were, you know, just feeling gushy. It was a good day, and we were like, "Oh my gosh, I think we finally found our soul tribe." Or at least I said that. You know,
That's
we
wonderful.
yeah, I can get super mushy. I don't care. They deal with it. Anyway, you know, we celebrate each other. We text each other, we support one another, we show up for one another, we check each other when we're being irrational or silly. But we just have fun. We celebrate joy. We get together regularly and we don't feel bad about that. You made a good point, Dorothy. For so long, our femininity has been abused or our sexuality has been pathologized. But we get together and when we're like feeling good, looking good, we compliment one another and we're like, hey, Yes, we are here. We have arrived. And I think more of us need to enter spaces with that mentality. Yes, I feel like you have to find your soul tribe to really be able to practice yourself authentically like that. But if you don't put yourself out there, how would you find the people that you are supposed to connect with? And I think you nailed it, Dorothy. Just generations and years of this has affected our self-esteem to the point that we're just not showing up. And I
No,
think we have to reverse that, or just feel more comfortable showing up, rather.
I agree with that. I definitely agree. Dorothy really made a very strong point and a valid point. And just for us and loving on each other. And I see as you were talking, Hafia, it just brought a smile to my face. So I love when you said, "Oh, it gives me joy." So it's really, it's good, and it's like sister love. It's not lost. We have to find that gentle and quiet place where we could become excited and enjoy that moment. Thanks for sharing that. It's great.
Yeah, what I thought about was how do we honor the humanity? I acknowledging for ourselves and when we're with each other and when other people are around us that we are human.
Yes.
And that's something I feel like that's the number one thing I say in therapy when people make mistakes, when they do things they think they don't like. Just being like, I'm human. When you're stressed about work, being like, you're human. How much can you really do in your work? How much can you really do every day with the time that you have versus the responsibilities versus the expectations? And giving yourself permission to be human and to fail and to get back up or to just stay sitting down and being like, actually, I need a break. And being able to do that because so many other people do. So many other people are fine taking a break. They're fine leaving the responsibility onto someone else. And there's ways where I think as Black women, we're like, no, I have to stay and finish this. Actually, I have to continue to work past my capacity, past this. I have to say yes to this thing. And just being able, I think there's a lot of power in even saying no.
Yes.
Being like, that's a full sentence. I don't have to explain it. I don't
Mm.
have to give you a reason. I don't have to, even for myself, like this is just something that doesn't align with me. And I think being in alignment with yourself,
Mm.
trusting yourself, I think that's a huge thing. I think is part of my work as a therapist is helping women, men too, being like, how do you trust yourself? Not to say that trust means that you're going to make the best decision every time,
Mm.
but that you are doing what you know to be right with what you know right now in the present. And that doesn't guarantee things in the future, but truly just being able to say, yeah, I'm human. Like I do mess up. I did make a mistake at work and I learned from that and I grew from
Mhm.
that. And
And be
not always
okay.
focusing on the shame. Yeah, always focusing on the shame or guilt, because
Mhm.
that doesn't come from a place where it does help us or support
Yes,
us or push us forward.
that is so true. And it just, I love what you said. It's really just being who we are and not being afraid of those mistakes and just being gentle to ourselves. It's times that I have to say, not judge myself and just be kind to myself, and just know that I'm part of this human race as well. And, I may do things a little different or whatnot, but I'm not the only one who makes mistakes. And it's just really allowing ourselves to feel that freedom of who we are and embracing that. Beautiful. Love it.
Um,
Mhm.
so I grew up in a white space, so I can answer the second part or
Okay, go
half part.
ahead. Go ahead.
So one thing that I can clearly remember is people touching my hair all the time, of course. And when I graduated high school, being like, I'm never going to allow that to happen again in my life. I'm never going to allow people to make me feel small and
Mm,
to make me feel like I'm not enough because
yes, yes.
this is not the community that looks like me. This is not the standard that I need to mimic myself off of because I never will be able to fill that standard.
No.
Mm.
And so I think when you are in predominantly white spaces, being able to just be yourself and understand that not everyone is going to be okay with that and not everyone is going to like that, but people will love you for who you are and hate you for who you are. And so you're the one that has to move through the world as you are and being able to take ownership of yourself and your way of dressing or talking or being
Yes.
is a way to show up for yourself to
Mhm.
be authentic
Sure.
even in areas that say like, hey, maybe that's not professional or hey, maybe that's not okay. Because I think especially in white spaces, we have to remember that professionalism was not described or defined for our community.
No.
And so ways that we're able to show up authentically for ourselves, do a good job and do a damn good job, because I think a lot of us do, which is why we're asked to do so much and so much.
Yeah.
And remember that too, that it is important for us to be so authentic and to be positive about ourselves, even if we're not hearing that positive feedback. And that's where I think it ties into trusting ourselves.
Yeah. That's powerful. I
Mhm.
think that's really great. I love us. I think now more than ever, we are really showing who we are. We're showing up. We're showing up with our hair, how we like our hair to look. We're showing up just being who we are, the way that we dress, and being comfortable with that. So in white spaces, it's not so threatening. It's just the fact of coming in and knowing who I am, and I can still get the work done. I could still have a conversation with everyone here. I could still be an authentic person. And as you said, they either love you or hate you, but the joy and the peace that we bring within ourselves and the positive energy, it only stimulates good love. So wherever we're at. Okay. I don't know where Brenison is at, but I think, oh, there she is. We're ready for the next set.
Thank you so much. And I'm gonna not talk as much this next time. So this next theme is theme 3, so resources and therapy for Black women. I'm just looking at a few things in the chat too of people saying that sharing their own experiences and wanting to connect with you all, and finding that so meaningful for them, and how powerful it is, and lots of speaking positive affirmations and all of those things of establishing power within. Some people saying that they've never heard of this term of white spaces, and I think that that kind of speaks to privilege as well too, of not having that awareness. So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. So now onto this next theme. There were a lot of questions, dozens of questions about therapy for Black women. So another quote, apologize for the barking dog in the background, from the interview with Brené Brown and Tarana Burke. So, an unrelenting nature of intergenerational trauma, and that's not familial trauma. There are some things that have improved for Black people in the United States, and then there are other things that are exactly the same but with new faces. Systems that have not necessarily improved, they just look different. And we just keep trying to reshape the same tools that we use to try to dismantle the ever-changing systems. So quickly, if you would like to share some words of what you associate with therapy, I know some of you have already shared that in the chat, but if there are things that might be helpful for us in guiding the conversation and thinking about where you all are at, which we of course understand, it will be very diverse. Some of you may say, you know, I've gone to therapy for years. I love it. It's super valuable. I've had very positive experiences with it. Others who have also already shared might say it's not for me, or had really negative experiences, or there's a lot that I would need to work on within myself to even feel open to being able to talk to someone who I don't know about these, about my concerns or other things too. But someone in the chat said that they associate therapy with healing. Now, others are saying self-care, introspection, maybe it brings up some fear or vulnerability. Being vulnerable, accepting the fact that they need support. Again, lots of vulnerability with therapy, because you're allowing people to kind of see you at different points. A safe place to be vulnerable. Fear of judgment, untangling the chaos in my heart and mind, mindfulness, acceptance of myself, potential to be enlightening, restorative, and transformative. Associating it with breaking intergenerational traumas, right?
Mhm.
That's pretty good. That's really deep.
Untangling the chaos that lives in my heart and mind. Whoa, yeah.
That was,
Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
they
what
should change the definition in dictionary.com for therapy to
change it to
that.
that. Mhm.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. A safe space, spiritual, holistic care, meditation, aromatherapy, saging. Yeah, can mean a lot of different things to people. So we'll progress onto this next section, which will be led by Dorothy. So you can go ahead and take it away.
Okay. What questions may Black women ask if ask their potential therapist during an intake, so first appointment, to assess if they're a good fit and what is the importance of community and treatment group therapy, collective healing approaches as alternatives to talk therapy. So as far as the questions, I kind of researched and found some that I think were really good. Do you speak my language?
Ah,
Depending on what your language is, whether it's English or not, do you speak my language? How much experience do you have in treating people with my ethnicity? How much training do you have in cultural competency with my ethnicity? Have you been trained on the ways discrimination and racism can impact someone's mental health? Are you comfortable talking about the cultural racial differences between us early on?
mm,
Do you feel comfortable talking about white privilege or male privilege, depending, and or both? How many people of color have you seen consistently for at least like 5 to 10 visits? I really was surprised by that question, but I really liked it.
Mhm.
Um, how would you respond if I pointed out a comment that you made as being racist or biased? And I really like those questions just because I feel like they're very direct and to the point, which
yeah.
is kind of something that you need in the intake. And then I think one of the things that I've been kind of telling people is also reading bios, seeing how you feel from them, just even seeing if you can have a phone conversation, because I think hearing someone's voice and how they respond to those questions versus if that's an email also can give you a sense of whether or not this person would be a good fit. I think with myself as a Black woman and a lot of Black women that I know, authenticity is a huge thing as a part of therapy. And so in that conversation, it's a good place to say, like, what are the vibes I'm getting? Because ultimately what I tell all my clients is, and all the intakes that I have, is that therapy is a relational relationship. And so just like every person that you meet doesn't become your friend, every therapist you meet doesn't necessarily mean they'll be the right fit, and how to trust, like, oh, this isn't potentially the right fit. And, but potentially giving it 1 or 2 tries. But I also think as Black people, when you're looking, just trusting yourself and your gut of like, this is someone that I do feel like I could build a relationship with. I do feel like I would be open with. But if it's really like a hard no, not an avoidant, like I'm not ready for therapy, no, but like a hard no, I really don't see myself being open, then trusting yourself and looking for someone that is a better fit.
Mhm.
What about you guys?
Yeah, wow, you covered so
Yeah,
much.
that's a great question.
Yeah, I love that. There was so much that you said that I just agree with, and I was thinking about um, one of the questions that I came up with is to how or have you worked with individuals or families experiencing ongoing traumatic stress? We haven't even approached post traumatic stress, so it would be helpful for a clinician, a mental health professional to really understand all of the different dynamics that Black people have experienced that cause traumatic stress, and is continuous. It has never stopped. And if that professional has experience in really understanding these facets, the racial, the cultural, the family dynamic cycles, to be able to work with that individual. I was thinking along those lines because it would be very helpful to have a therapist who is pretty much aware, and it's especially for a person who is having not only family traumatic stress, but relational with their significant others. For example, domestic violence. And they have multiple things. So it's to where there's layers and layers. And that would be really an important question, I think, a person can ask the therapist.
What about the second part of community and treatment? One thing that I think can be helpful if you're really struggling, because I think a lot of my clients of color, I think, end up wanting their parents to go to therapy, or siblings or other people, and like we talked about like how to talk to your family about it, but also just even knowing like yourself as a person in therapy, does have an impact, maybe not totally changing because nobody can have that power, but does have an impact on the system. Because I have so many clients that I've seen for years where just through therapy they can conversate with their parents a little differently or show up in some of their relationships really differently, which then in turn changes how their parents approach things, or even the ways they've set boundaries with them, being like, our relationship really has gotten better because they realize like this is a firm boundary, or I'm really going to stand up for myself in a different way. And so we're not as having intensity in our relationship. So remembering that you're part of the community, so going to therapy will impact the community. And also going to group therapy, like Hafia said earlier, going to community healing sessions and circles, and being able to be open and vulnerable in spaces where you know you're going to get the support that you're looking for, which sometimes does not come in the form of a friend or a family.
True. So true.
Right. But sometimes, you know, the peers who show up in those spaces with you inadvertently or advertently become your family. Like, you know, I think the AA modality really kind of embodies that, you know, say what you will about AA, but that collective healing, that collective gathering, and even that collective accountability is hugely, hugely effective, because not only is that one counselor, one person, responsible for evaluating your progress, your setbacks, whatever. But now you have a whole community kind of watching you like, hey, did you show up today? I think that's profoundly invaluable. And I remember as you were talking, both of you, when I worked in a treatment center, I was a director for a women and families residential treatment center. And just the power and beauty that would arise in some of those group spaces, just amazing, amazing. Just seeing women support one another specifically in that setting. But I know that extends to other healing group settings as well. You know, and I always tell my clients too, I think therapy and this individual work that we do together extends beyond our face-to-face session. Like, how are you practicing these things in your relationships, in your interpersonal relationships, or even in your workspaces? And I feel like that communal, that collective setting allows you to kind of practice that. You know, you can practice having those dialogues with people who are not a part of your internal system, where you might feel more safe or less safe. But you just kind of learn how to navigate the nuances and varying kinds of personalities and communication styles. I just think it's great practice. It's hugely invaluable, that community, collective group healing space.
So question 2, how can Black women support their own mental health and wellness if they can't afford services or access services, and what strategies and tools have helped you throughout your life to tend to your holistic needs? So first, I think seeing if there's any sliding scale places around you if you really truly do want to access a mental health professional. There are different podcasts I think that are great that can be, I think, what does Dr. Joy say? Like, she's not a supplement for therapy, but it's like an alternative in a way. So kind of knowing the differences too of like, if I'm just speaking to a professional and accessing information in that way, but if I can't, are there podcasts like Therapy for Black Girls? Are there books, depending on what's going on, right? So I have clients kind of start with different books like The Body Is Not an Apology, because I think that's a great way to work on or just addressing self-esteem and ways that society puts pressure on us with our bodies. Brene Brown is always a great, I think, resource for vulnerability and shame, and books on attachment and kind of figuring out what your attachment style is, because that can be something that impacts relationships and how you show up in them. And just kind of learning about yourself, like learning, like, after I get upset in something, why? What happened? Why am I upset? Was it something that somebody said? Was it something I thought they said? Was it how they reacted? And doing the kind of work to understand yourself and why you do the things that we do, because myself included, I think as I've grown in therapy, I've just learned like there's so much that I didn't know about myself. There was so much that, because we do ignore our body and our triggers and just different things, there were things that bothered me that I didn't really know. And I think there's just ways where, especially in the Black community, there are things we try to avoid for lots of good reasons, like anger, because of the stereotypes. And so some of that, I think, are you regularly avoiding those feelings because they don't really go away. They don't go away. They show up in other places. And so how do you just learn yourself more, learn your likes, learn your dislikes, things like that.
Just learning your body, just learning those muscles, like you were talking about, the muscles in my body, what makes it so tight, what keeps me down. I'm thinking too, like in community, maybe I love the group. I love that people can attend groups, and yes, sometimes you do have to have insurance for that or whatnot. But I'm just thinking of journaling, just journaling thoughts, and I agree with the podcast. But I feel like to support your own mental health is really designing your own type of practice routine, a daily practice to help you mindfully for your mental health, spiritual health, and physical health is to find out what gives you joy, what allows you to exercise any feelings that really help you to want to do better in your life. So let's just, for example, I like I said, journaling, but then just starting a regime to where in the morning, maybe exercising, doing yoga, taking long walks, finding something that helps you mentally, physically, and emotionally to be inspired by that. And as well as talk to people to find out if there are any connections in the community that will offer some type of help with mental health wellness, that into where you wouldn't have to financially spend so much money for. And it's just really finding what works for you. What is your body asking for? And reading books and even videos, and even connecting with maybe friends that you have to talk about what have they been doing, and to try to find a buddy, to have conversations about. And many of us can even get information from our own medical doctor, and how we could work through some of these challenging feelings and emotions that we are experiencing, or thoughts that we're experiencing.
Thank you so much. I don't think we'll have time for the last question of this theme. But if you do have any other questions or want that was something you're really looking forward to, we'll have the contact information for all the panelists if you do want to reach out to them directly. So this last theme is showing up with Black women. And so that was something, a lot of questions that you all had when you signed up for this event. Were questions about how do I actually help? How do I actually be there? And so that's what this next section is about. And I think that a word that gained a lot of popularity in this past year due to Dr. Ibram Kendi is anti-racist, right? Anti-racist, not just being not racist, but being actively anti-racist. And so I think that this quote, again, from You Are Your Best Thing, really speaks to that of those who are not Black. How can we think about what we're doing and what we are claiming to be our anti-racist work? So this quote says, I do not believe in your anti-racist work if you have not engaged with Black humanity. It's not like Black people don't have anything to learn about Black experience. Our experiences are vast and different. It's validating to see that even in our various identities and experiences, we engage in similar struggles, we have the same needs. And as other people engage with the book they're referring to, it's about seeing the breadth of our humanity and the depth of it, because this is the reality. It comes back to compassion and love, always love. So our very last opportunity for engagement for you all is to share the ways that you currently show up with Black women. What are ways that you would like to start showing up with Black women? So it could be, literally showing up in terms of going to protests for Breonna Taylor and going to different events like that. And it can be a lot of other ways too. It can be online, it can be through legislation, it can be through politics, it can be through social movements, and lots of different ways that you can do this. So feel free to share that in the chat if you would like, or just continue to ponder and think about them. So I'll hand it over to Hafia for the very last discussion section.
Hey, we've arrived. Theme 4. All right, question 1. How can space be created and integrated into the workplace and other community settings to honor and listen to the experiences and needs of Black women? When I was thinking about this question or the answer to it, I was thinking about the spaces that I have arrived in that I felt the most comfortable in. And we started this conversation just talking about what that looked like, what that felt like. And I think safety is like the overarching theme of that. And sometimes we have to create our own safety in these settings. That's a different conversation. But I think it's reflective, it's diverse. Paying attention to your artwork, paying attention to the music that you're playing, paying attention to the staff that are hired and who are providing some of these services. What do they look like? What are some of their values? What kinds of questions are you asking during the interviewing process to make sure that these are safe providers to even put in front of our community members, specifically Black people? And really fostering an environment that is inclusive. And I think, a lot of the members in the chat really nailed it when they were just saying, just listen without making assumptions, but don't just listen for the sake of listening, respond. And if you don't know how to respond, seek insight from the people that you are trying to serve. What a novel concept, I don't know, focus groups. And inviting elders to come in to really try to craft what a safe, inclusive, healing, and comforting environment could look like, and how some of those practices can be evoked in how you provide your provisions and your services. What do you guys think?
Oh, it's beautiful. Yes, I totally agree. Everything you said is very powerful. And space is important to bring your wisdom, bring kindness, bring calm, bring creativity in the art that you have, and to just show some peace and to allow people to feel comfortable. And I just like the way that you explained that, because it really helps when a person walks in and they could feel a sense of belonging, a sense of I connect in this space. And I feel that's genuine. And I really feel that the space is you. This is what you created. It's you. And when people walk in, you are the space.
Mm-hmm.
And you are their hope and their gratitude. And you are who they are. And they could connect with that. And I think that's very important in walking in spaces, and to be comfortable and to allow peace to just reminisce in the room. And as you mentioned, the silence and the greatness of how people are feeling within. So it just sets the tone.
Yeah, I agree with what everybody said. I think being able to see that there are people that look like you, either on the walls or in the lobby or on the staff, being authentic, being direct in your communication, not being passive aggressive. I think all those things can help really create a space and a workspace where Black women feel safe.
Yes.
All right, question 2. How do we show up in a compassionate way with a Black woman who may be experiencing a mental health crisis? And this is something that I think Women's Advocates does really well. Fortunately, I was able to work there, and, to talk about an inviting space, like there's such diverse artwork on the wall. The colors are thoughtful. I think, Women's Advocates did a really good job cultivating that. But I think, first offering them the space and time to breathe. Yeah. If they're experiencing a crisis, chances are their breaths have been shallow. They have been holding on to their breath. They have been tightening and tensing their muscles. So just allowing them to arrive and breathe. Like for a moment, you can be still. And I think, that's something that Women's Advocates just did really well in other spaces too. Giving them some water. Have you eaten?
Yes.
Before we jump to this intake process and I just question you for the next hour and a half, do you have to use the bathroom? Like, those kinds of things. I think that's first. And I think that's meeting their basic needs. And we were talking about safety before. That contributes to that. Okay, I can exhale and then I can respond to some of these intake and clinical questions a little better and perhaps come up with a more thoughtful treatment plan.
Mhm.
Um, Also, I found that compliments, women love compliments, and so do, Black women are not exceptions to that. So if they are coming in and their hair is beautiful, their outfit is beautiful, they still made an effort to be despite experiencing that crisis, acknowledge that. Please say something about that hairdo, or even if they smell good, like, if they put forth the effort to make themselves feel better, even amidst a crisis, acknowledge that. Um, and I think lastly, just listening, like we talked about before, listening without trying to fix, without trying to resolve, without trying to, assess what they've already done, but just being there with them. And I think you'll be able to, like I said, create more thoughtful conversations and healing plans if you allow them to just decompress and feel fully heard.
Oh, Fia, that was so beautiful. I do agree. Absolutely. Women's advocates really, it's very inviting and live by the great values that we apply to our service. I think it's great. And yes, just being present and caring really about the women. I go by the quote that I said earlier. I just come with this quote in my head and in my heart that I am because you are. And together we could work through some things.
Mhm.
And you are because I am. You are no different. I am here. I am in purpose. And that tone sets an engagement for a very, very good therapeutic um, relationship. And it's just treating people human, treating the women human, and even welcoming their children. As you mentioned earlier, a drink of water. What is it that I could give you that you need? And it's even, hey, we even have a children's program. Would you like for your child to go there while we have this conversation? It's being inviting, engaging, and just really loving on the women as they are.
Mhm.
Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
I think for me, the number one thing would be being calm.
you.
I think that when Black people in general, Black women especially too, show up in any type of crisis, there can be this like, I think it can activate somebody's anxieties or different things, and checking yourself and being like, oh, I'm feeling anxious. I need to breathe. I need to support this person that's in front of me. They are the priority right now. They're what matters. And then just also not taking things personally. People are
Yes.
going to say things and do things at the height of a crisis, just like you as a human being would say things and do things at a height of a crisis that you may not actually mean. And I think a lot of people tend to get in a back and forth or a power dynamic, and really recognizing like, I am not in crisis. This other person is in crisis. And so I need to be calm. I need to say things that are supportive and helpful, all the things that everyone else said, in order to support them through this crisis. And if I'm here, my idea is that I want to support them through that crisis. And so not centering yourself.
Yeah.
Right. And if I can just add to that, that's a great point that I meant to bring up earlier. Like in a crisis assessment or even just a crisis conversation, we're trying to identify a lot of the things that are going wrong that perhaps led to this crisis unfolding. Well, what are the things that are going right?
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
despite this crisis, have you held a job? Are you
Mhm.
eating every day or at least once a day? Like I talked about those compliments before, despite, going through whatever, you still have the energy and enough wherewithal to comb your hair. Like, those are not easy feats. And I think pointing those things out and pointing out the positive things, and I'm not going to use that word resilient, but the ways that despite of or despite, they continue to show up. I think, and that's just strengths-based counseling. I think we spend a lot of time, and we're trained to do this, to identify symptoms and
Yeah.
pathology.
Yeah.
And I think a good counter or caveat to that is to highlight the things that they are just doing well, because they got themselves there, they got themselves through that door, and that deserves an applause. So, give it to them.
Yes. Mhm.
Okay. Oh, question 3.
Oh, okay.
Okay. How can we bear witness to the stories and experiences of Black women while engaging in anti-racist, trauma-informed work? When we were kind of prepping this conversation, Dorothy, you said something so profound that just stuck with me. And that's just like suggesting our favorite artists, our favorite Black owned entities, and encouraging our white and non people of color counterparts to experience that. And you said, in America, white people have the luxury of going to a space, a service entity, and they know that there are going to be other people there that look like them. They don't have to worry about finding a white waitress or server or anything like that. And so, asking our white allies and counterparts to experience that too. Go to that Black owned business, show
Yeah.
up, support. How do you feel? Pay attention to your body and your emotions, what's coming up for you. And that not only leads to empathy and a more thorough understanding, but they're going to have a damn good time because that food's going to be good, that podcast is going to be interesting, and that song is going to be on point. Okay, so it's just enhancing and giving them variety of experience so they can relate better.
Yeah, kind of what I had said too was like, white people know, like, you're going to be able to go to a lawyer's office and find a lawyer that looks like you. Black people don't have that opportunity. It's really hard, as a lot of people said in the chat, to find a Black therapist. So even in your mental health, if you want someone, a doctor, a dentist, you're not able to just easily access it. And so I think sometimes white people get caught up in like, I'm afraid, or I'm anxious, I don't know what to do. And some of that is being able to say, like, that's privilege, because ultimately every Black person is the minority in a lot of spaces, and we're not taught, this is how you work with white people. This is the best practices. We just do, and we live in that world. And so being able to just acknowledge, like, I have a lot of work to do. There are grocery stores that I could go to. I could get hair products at different places. I could eat, like Hafia said, food is great. Going to different churches, just being able to say, like, I don't have to do these things if I don't want to, but if I want to work with people that don't look like me, I need to go in these spaces. And I actually have to tell myself that I have to be in these spaces in order to be a better provider. And yeah, I definitely think listening and all those things, but I also think listening and reflecting.
Yes.
And I really want people to hear us when we say listen, because I think people hear us, but they're not listening. Because if you're hearing us and then your response is something that has nothing to do with what we said, or something that dismisses what we said because you feel like, as the provider or whatever, the advocate, you know better than us, that's a really great sign that you need to take a step back and recognize that you weren't listening.
I totally agree. The two words, the listening and reflecting, are powerful. And that is something that really needs to happen consistently. One of the things that I was thinking of too is that people have to do their own healing work. People are responsible for their own healing work, especially working with BIPOC populations as well as Black people. I mean, even the work included in BIPOC, but not even separating it, to look at it to where your work is important. Understand your history, understand the history of people, understanding the work and your calling to the work, and how to facilitate that work when people come to you who may not and will not have the privilege that you have in society, and being humble to that.
Thank you so much. We are just making it just a moment until time, because we want to be respectful of everyone's time. But this is the contact information. You can take a picture of it with your phone. It'll also be in the slides, so don't worry, you will receive it. And this is all with the permission of the panelists of the information that they would like shared with you all, with the encouragement to reach out if you would like to. And then we do have a resource page. So I included the link, it's on the screen here. It's also going to be in the follow-up email, it's in the chat. I'll also put it on our Women's Advocates webpage because I think it's very incredible and important. And again, with the invitation of you all to send an email, say, hey, this resource is out of date, please remove it from this list, or hey, you forgot this one, add it. So there's a table of contents, you can click on it. I'll show it really quickly in our last few moments together here. Oh, wait a second. All right. Here's what it looks like. And then you can click on all these different ones and say, oh, hey, I really want to like support, Black business owners. There's lots of ones here. If you say, hey, I want to, add people to those organizations to follow, add people to my social media, diversify my feed, or I really want to read books that are written specifically by Black female authors. So a lot of these have been mentioned already too. Lots of other books written by Black authors who are not women. Podcasts. So there's the Therapy for Black Girls podcast right there. So lots of different opportunities to continue doing this work, continue these conversations, directories for finding a Black therapist, lots of different web pages, articles, providing care if you are a social service provider, mental health provider who wants to be accessible to Black individuals. There's some guidance on that. And then that kind of wraps it up. We don't have too much time for final questions or anything, but we are just so grateful that you spent part of your Friday afternoon with us. And I'm so grateful for you all and listening to the responses that you had. Please, attendees, fill out the post-webinar survey. Let us know what you thought, if you would like to have an event like this again, if you like discussion-based, panel-based webinars, feel free to send back feedback. Seeing a lot of gratitude in the chat. I'm going to send 3 things really quick again in the chat: information on how to request a certificate of attendance, as well as the resource page link and that post-webinar survey link. So, all right, great. Just reading everything in the chat. Thank you all so much. I'm going to stop the recording.